The Pittsburgh Steelers released Mason Cole on Friday last week, and we got word of what the salary cap would be. We break down those and do Mock Draft Monday here on the Monday episode of the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Steelers, your daily Pittsburgh Steelers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, welcome to the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter, bringing you your daily dose of all things in the Pittsburgh Steelers. As always, you can find this show on your favorite podcasting apps and on YouTube. Like this video if you enjoy it. Subscribe to this YouTube channel to get all of your daily Monday through Friday episodes, as well as our bonus content. We thank you for making us your first listen every day because we're your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. FanDuel Sportsbook, make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150. If your bet wins, visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. Now, some housekeeping notes. One, I am recording this episode in Pittsburgh on Sunday night, but I am, well, if you're watching this, you're most likely watching this while I'm on the road to Indianapolis. I will be in Indianapolis for the Combine all week. We'll be doing our shows from there for the remainder of the week. We'll see, and we will be getting them up there. A shout out to those, if you're watching this on YouTube, please tell those who might be asking, why isn't it up on audio just yet? If you're watching this early Monday morning, we're having some technical switch arounds here at the Locked On Podcast Network that will not allow the audio to post until about 12:01 noon Eastern time. So if you're a person that loves listening to the show on a podcast platform early in the morning, we apologize for this one episode, but it will not that will not be a problem moving forward after today. But let's get to the things that happen. And it's kind of funny how stuff happens, right? We did a whole episode for Friday, and then Friday the news comes out that, Mason Cole is cut, and we see the new salary cap space. And it's like, well, everyone's like, well, man, we would have loved an episode right away. Well, this is why we hold on to things we could talk about it Monday. Now, we will get to talk to Omar Khan both Monday afternoon and Tuesday morning. So we'll get two chances to speak with Steelers GM Omar Khan and hear from him about the Steelers' approach to the Combine, the offseason, and hear some reaction points as far as what they're planning to do moving forward. But let's talk about the impact of them cutting Mason Cole. Now, again, this was not a unforeseen thing. This was something that we said on the show was probably going to happen, that should happen with the level of play that he had. It made a ton of sense for what he was doing. It saved about, I think, like $4 million against the cap. He was a $6.2 million cap hit, and they needed to. And Mason Cole just wasn't playing at the level that they needed him to play. He just wasn't that guy. To 2022, you could say he was acceptable, and he was even a boost from what they gave with Kendrick, where they got with Kendrick Green. But in 2023, he had too many poor snaps and wasn't good enough of a blocker to kind of discount that problem. And so the Steelers obviously needed a center. But this move to me signifies, they're going and getting a center. And it could be free agency, it could be the draft. I think what you're going to see them do is you might see them get a lower level center in free agency, but I think that they're going to really emphasize getting their man in the draft, just because. Here's the thought here. You do have to pay Mason Cole some dead money. He's owed, $1.2 million in dead money this season. They could go get a center, and there are decent centers in free agency right now. The guy that I really like is Aaron Brewer. He's a former Titan. He played a year for Arthur Smith's offense when he was a rookie, but he was an undrafted rookie, and that was the thing. He developed over those years to be a really good center for the Tennessee Titans, and now he's hitting free agency. And you could look and see what's going to happen. Also, as I've said all along, these are early free agency predictions because new players will be added to free agency almost every week. Last week, Xavier Howard from the cornerback from the Dolphins, who's been very good in his career, got added to the pool. He'll be an interesting mix to see where he goes. So I don't think we've seen the full free agency pool. But the Steelers, they could go for a guy like Lloyd Cushenberry from the Broncos, Aaron Brewer from the Titans, and free agency. But I just think that with the situation that they have, they want to get their guy for the future. And I think they want to be in a position, because if they sign a center, they're not drafting one, and I think that they want to be able to have one that's not that expensive now, can be on a rookie deal for 5 years, can grow with Broderick Jones, and can be part of the anchors of the future of this offensive line. Now, here's the other thing: if they end up getting a superstar tackle, that's another situation that maybe they deal with another bridge center this year. I anticipate them, if they sign a center, maybe it's a low-level center that doesn't cost them too much, or maybe they say, hey, Nate Herbig, James Daniels, you guys have experience snapping the ball. One of you two guys is going to be the guy. Maybe they draft a guard of some sort in the later rounds. But I think what this does do, though, is the Steelers want to invest in it. And here's why I think that last six situation that I gave you is the least of the likely of those options I'm saying, because I don't think that them getting rid of Mason Cole is a money move. He only saved like a little under $4 million in cap space. They want to be very good at center. They don't want to have another guy switching to center from another position, or Herbig playing backup. I think they want to go draft a guy who's the guy, or if they go sign a guy who's a big deal, that too. But they want a starter. They don't want to get a guy at center anymore who's just holding the place down for while the rest of the offensive line plays well. I think them letting go Mason Cole's a sign from Omar Khan, from Andy Weidel. They want this offensive line to work. They want a center who's going to be able to be a leader in this offensive line for the future. And that means either going and getting a really good one in free agency. There's not a superstar center in free agency. There's some good ones. Connor Williams from the Dolphins is really good. Again, I like Aaron Brewer, but I think this is more signs that Jackson Powers Johnson out of Oregon, or Zach Frazier out of West Virginia are going to be major targets for the Steelers in this draft. And I know some people think center is not enough of an important position in today's NFL to draft in the first round, but I think the Steelers, they're going to find a way to attack it with this move of letting go of Mason Cole. Because again, you have backup options. Herbig can still be your backup interior offensive lineman who can fill in at center. James Daniels can switch over there in an emergency pitch situation. I don't think that it's necessarily the move to go draft a center in the later rounds who you kind of have just floating on the roster or developing for 3 years. I think it makes a lot more sense if you're letting go of a guy like Mason Cole, you're drafting your center for the future. And that's the real impact of this situation. I think it only furthers the message that we've been trying to hammer home on this show on Locked On Steelers, that look out for centers in the draft and in the combine, because they're going to be a major pushing point for the Steelers. And with the salary cap news, we now have a better sense of how much money the Steelers will spend. Now, some people saw the additional $30 million, compared to last year as a big boost for everyone, and it is a boost for the NFL in general. But I don't think it's the kind of boost that everyone's thinking it is, in the way that they're thinking, oh, this is just $30 more million that they can spend now that they weren't projected for. Allow me to explain that after the first break here on the Locked On Steelers podcast, because there's a few ways to look at this. It's still a good situation. The Steelers are, and like I said all along, the Steelers are not in a bad cap situation this offseason, but how they handle it is going to be very important for how they want to build this next core that they want to try to win with in Pittsburgh. We'll do that here next on the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter. Stick with us. We'll be right back. But first, I want to remind you this show is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, the #1 sportsbook in America. Right now, new customers at FanDuel can get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's right. And if you're like me, football season being done doesn't mean I'm done with sports. Right now, FanDuel gives you so many different ways to play with the NBA, the NHL, college basketball, and so many more sports out there. There's so many ways to win every single day on every single sport that's still going on. It's a great time of the year to be betting on sports, and that's why FanDuel gives you so many ways to win. You can make quick bets. You can make live same game parlays, exclusive prop bets. You can have so many different ways to win. You can even search up what are the best prop bets. There are so many ways to win and so many ways to find your favorite bets on FanDuel, an app you can download right to your phone and start playing today. And new customers, if you join today, you'll get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet of $5 or more wins. But and again, those bonus bets you can use to all those different types of bets I said, live same game parlays, prop bets. Those are extra bets that you can make to bring home the winnings. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to sign up today. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NBA. Back here in the Locked On Steelers podcast, I'm your host, Chris Carter. We continue our show here on Monday. Again, a reminder, the Combine is this week. I'll be in Indianapolis for the Combine. I'm going to have to set up at my hotel and record from there. So settings will be a little bit different moving forward. So just a shout out to everyone to know that we will be dealing with that at some point. But let's get to talking about the salary cap situation now. If you were paying attention, on Friday there was an announcement. The NFL, is officially their salary cap was raising about $30 million from what it was in 2023 to like $255.4 million is how much every team's going to spend. And well, that's very good news. It's another great sign that football is working. Football is making more money. I think the more lucrative deals, the more streaming deals that they make, the more ways they find to make money, the more money that the teams will be able to spend on their players. And that's good news for the sport. It's good news for everybody. The players are getting more. There's a lot more going on there. Good news for the entire NFL. And for the Steelers, it's also good news because it gives them a little bit. Now, I had some people asking me like, well, Chris, doesn't this mean they just have $30 million more to spend? Well, not if you've been looking at the projections that we've been looking at all time, because this was also very much expected. It was a little bit higher than I think than what a lot of people were saying. I think that people were expecting $25 to $27 million to be added onto the salary cap, and this happens all the time. This is not new. If you're not a person that pays attention to news cycles, the salary cap goes up all the time. It's just kind of keeping pace with how much money the NFL is making. And there was a time during COVID where the salary cap went down because of obvious reasons. The NFL just wasn't making that much, but we said, even if you go back and watch our 2020 episodes or in 2021, when we were talking about this, like, hey, the salary cap's going down now, but it's going to be going back up in a few years when football, is making more money. We're living in those times now. And that's a good sign for everybody. But if you've been watching the projections, the Steelers, like they have the same amount of money that we were saying they were going to have. Like right now, with the addition of also letting go of Mason Cole, the Steelers have about $9 million in cap space right now for their season, and that is still without letting go of Allen Robinson, who will not be under contract under the $11.9 million cap hit that he would be if the Steelers just took him for the rest of the year. They can let him go right now and get $10 million extra on the cap. That would put them at $19 million approximately in salary cap space. And that's a really good space to be in just with the moves that they've made so far. That's still not letting go of Patrick Peterson. That's still not looking at, other guys that they could make moves on, maybe like DeMonte Casey and other lower level guys that they could let go to clear up a few extra dollars in cap space. It's also without restructuring deals for guys like TJ Watt, guys like Minka Fitzpatrick, maybe extending Cam Hayward with some void years to spread out his $22.4 million cap hit, but keep him under contract for another year or two. Maybe guys like Larry Ogunjobi, who are $13.2 million cap hits, but didn't really perform at $13 million levels last year. There's a lot of different options the Steelers have on the table. And again, we're still looking at like $19 million just to start with there that they'll have at their disposal. So still, it's a good situation the Steelers in. Like, I'm not me saying that this isn't that the salary cap situation isn't as this boost in the rise in the salary cap. It doesn't do all the things that some people think it does for the Steelers. It's just another good sign that Omar Khan and Andy Waddle, the front office, handled last season well. Like they added talent in free agency. Isaac Seumalo was a hit. Pete Peterson helped with Porter and was an asset at safety when they needed him to fill in there. And sure, they have their misses. Certain guys didn't work out, but they didn't bankrupt the team. They didn't break up the continuity of how they want this core to currently have its funds set up, and they gave themselves room to be able to make moves this year. So all in all, it's another good sign that the Steelers are just paying attention to what they're doing in the front office and what the league is doing and understanding how the league's working. And that's part of what, for what the Steelers, I think what Omar Khan and this front office were supposed to be good at. And so that's what a good sign is there. I think it's another sign that the Steelers, they're handling things well and they're preparing to make smart moves. And again, why do they do things when they do them? Who knows what happens? Because Mason Cole was a cut that could have happened anywhere between 3 weeks ago and when free agency opened. They could have done anything, or even after free agency opened, as long as it was before June 1, the Steelers were going to get the amount of money back that they did into their salary cap space. So they were always going to have that space, whenever they made that move. And now the situation is, how do you use the rest of it? And again, you could probably clear out another, like they're at 9 million now, 19 million when you let go of Allen Robinson. Let's say they figure out something with Patrick Peterson, they restructure. I could see them getting up to like something like $40 million in cap space just to spend this year if they really want to be that aggressive. If you have that kind of cap space, you can sign a big name free agent, a top corner, maybe a veteran offensive lineman, a top safety that you like, and then still have other money to spend on the other players that you want to keep around. So the Steelers have space to do damage, and that's a really good thing for this free agency period, because I do think the Steelers are going to make a splash at one position. And when I say one position, I don't mean that it will just be cornerback or just be like, I'm not predicting that it's going to be what position it's going to be, but I do think they're putting themselves in position to make a big get at least at one spot, and depends on where they see the best opportunity. Now, everyone's going to look right to corner because Jalen Johnson and L'Jarius Sneed are at the top of that list. Xavier Howard's now going to be added to that list to see, where he fits into all of that. And that makes a lot of sense. But, if you're the Steelers, I don't think they're going after like a big name like Chris Jones or, anyone like that. Like they're not, or Mike Evans, they're not going to go after that, or Justin, or Antoine Winfield. But I could see them trying to get, maybe, some decent guys around the league. I could see them taking a swing at a guy like Mekhi Becton if they really wanted to add to the offensive tackle room, a guy who was a super athlete and a high pick that just didn't work out, had some injuries, and they could take him on a cheap deal. They could take more guys like that at different positions where it's like it's a high, low risk, high reward type of situation while filling out some depth spots on their team. So that's certainly an option. I wouldn't rule out also them looking at linebacker if they're uncomfortable with the Cole Holcomb injury situation. If they don't want to try to bring back Quan Alexander, they could get a guy like Josie Jewell, who's been with the Broncos and been a really good linebacker. They could go, get some of the Chiefs linebackers we've talked about. That are sitting out there. The thing is, there's a lot of options for them right now. And outside of like, a Chris Jones type of player, one of those top 10 free agents who are going to command like, 20 to $30 million a year, I think they're going to be in a running for a lot of different players. So ask yourself, and I want you to hit me up on Twitter at Carter Critiques. If you with your thoughts here, what position would you want them to hit the best at? If they could get one big swing on with a really good player at one position, where would you want that to be? Would it be corner? Would it be offensive tackle? Would it be center so that they don't have to draft one there? Would it be linebacker? Would it be defensive tackle? What if they let go of Larry Ogunjobi and then they went and got a big name player at that position that helped them there? Again, Chris Jones out of the picture. Justin Madubuike, I think, is going to be a little expensive, as will Christian Wilkins. But what if they let go of Larry Ogunjobi and they got like a Leonard Williams from the Giants, or a DJ Reader who's leaving the Bengals? Those are things that I think are a bit more reasonable. Or Sheldon Rankings, who was with the Texans. Those are things that I think that if they want to be aggressive, they can do right now. And it's, again, because of how they handled the salary cap position. It's why we also caution you guys about when you're talking about, hey, the Steelers just make a splash. They just need to be aggressive. They just need to do this. They're putting themselves in position to be able to do that without like overspending and putting them behind the 8 ball and ruining their chances at having a complete team in future years. That's where I think the Steelers have done a good job managing, and now they're in a position to go get that guy in free agency, get a couple other pieces here and there, and that way they've added a high-level veteran to a key position of need, and then they'll have several. They'll add some key depth pieces that can kind of support the roster and make it so that there's no glaring holes going into the draft, because that's ultimately what you want to do going into the draft. You want to make sure that from free agency, you don't go in with like a super glaring, if they don't draft this position need, that they're in deep trouble. You do that, I think you put yourself in a good spot, and I think that's what the Steelers will aim to do. And they always aim to do that. They always find a way to try to, in the offseason, in the free agency period, address all the major positions so that they can kind of just come to the board, to their big board, and on draft night and say, all right, who do we really want? But this year, you could do that with the money that's going to be available to them. They'll be able to do that and make at least one big signing in free agency that can be a boost to their team. The question will be what position. Again, hit me up at Carter Critiques on Twitter or X or whatever people want to call it now. Hit me up and let me know what position you'd like it to be, or even if you have a specific player who you think it can or will be for the Steelers. That is also an interesting way we can go about it. There is seeing which players you want. Personally, I think it would make a lot of sense to get a corner who could be a really good player. L'Jarius Sneed, I think, could be a really good get for the Steelers. We talked about him with Nick Faribault last week. He's a guy that's been on SteelersNow.com who's been saying L'Jarius Sneed for so long. And I think it makes a lot of sense. He's a guy that's in his mid to late 20s. You can sign him to a nice 3-4 year deal, keep him around. He's a good partner for Joey Porter Jr. And that way it also takes the pressure off of having to draft a corner super high in this class or needing Corey Trice or Darius Rush to just become the answer overnight. And if they become the answer, great. You have more good cornerbacks. Awesome. That's not a bad problem to have, right? So I think that's where my eyes would be, but I also would understand if the Steelers are like, hey, we want to find other answers at different positions. I also think that Tyler Boyd at wide receiver is a very reasonable answer. I don't think that the Steelers go and spend big at wide receiver. Like, I don't think they're getting Michael Pittman or Mike Evans, or even a Calvin Ridley or a guy like that. I think they're going to look for mid-level guys who can be solid veterans and help the room. And I think Tyler Boyd fits that perfectly. If you can get him around $7-8 million a year for 2 years, I think that's a perfect range for what you could get there. Maybe even a Michael Thomas. I prefer a Tyler Boyd just for what the Steelers, want in a receiver, but a veteran who's been successful, who knows good offensive systems and can play to a role and be a solid veteran on the team. That's another need that I can see happening there. But again, they could do all this because they've handled the cap situation well and they're prepared for what they need to do. We'll see what other moves they do to create cap space moving forward. But as I said, Omar Khan will be talking with Pittsburgh media Monday and Tuesday. We'll see that soon with maybe him answering some of those questions to media coming up. But we also have Mock Draft Monday ahead of us. Who won Mock Draft Monday this week? We had specific rules. I'll explain what the rules were and who won right after this break here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. But first, I want to remind you, this show is brought to you by BetterHelp Therapy Online. There's just times where you need an opportunity to get something off your chest. Big or small, certain things can really start to get to you. So it's important to let those things out, especially to someone who's unbiased in your life, like a good therapist, which you can find at BetterHelp Therapy Online. So today, I want to say how I really feel about something, just to get it off my chest so you can hear that. One thing I'm really happy about and something that frustrates me is I'm happy that I'm going to Indianapolis for a week. It's going to be a great time. The combine's a fun experience. I see a lot of people that I work with here, but also people that I respect and read and listen to nationally. It's also a great time to get all those prospects. But you know what's also great about it? It's flat in Indianapolis. If you live in Pittsburgh, you know we live on hills. I live in Squirrel Hill. I went to high school in Squirrel Hill. This place is hills everywhere. I'm just tired of walking up hills all the doggone time. And sometimes it just gets on your last nerves if you live in Pittsburgh. And listen, I love going to standing at the top of Mount Washington, seeing the great view. But some days your boys just wants to walk down a flat street just to go get a nice coffee, a nice drink, and just enjoy a nice day. And sometimes I need to let that out to a good therapist, which I can find at BetterHelp Therapy Online. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online. It's designed to be flexible and suited to your schedule, so you can make the time whenever you need to make the time to get to your therapist. Visit BetterHelp.com/lockedon to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. Back here on the Locked On Steelers podcast, I'm your host, Chris Carter. We continue our show here to get to Mock Draft Monday. Shout out to all the people that contributed on Mock Draft Monday. I do apologize. I didn't get my posts up until Sunday. I was extremely busy this weekend, y'all. I had to cover Pitt basketball and a big game that they won Saturday at the Peterson Event Center. Also, if you're in Pittsburgh, check out Pitt. They got like 2 more home games coming up in the next couple weeks. They're making a really good push. They're a lot of fun to cover. You can read all my work on that at post-gazette.com. The Peterson Event Center was packed. It's becoming a good time watching the Pitt Panthers for a lot of their fans, and I'll be giving you all their coverage there at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. But I was really busy with that, and also I had to pack. I had to get a lot of things done to get ready so I could go to Indy and not have to be behind all my other assignments. Y'all know I wear 1,000 hats in sports media. But With that, I wasn't able to get my post up in time, but still, I got up on Sunday and I still got hundreds of submissions. And I can't thank you all enough, because that is so cool to see that many people care to try to see, hey, here's what I picked. What do you think, Chris? And putting their logic out there. So shout out to everyone who did that. We had 3 rules in this one, because I wanted to be more specific to what I do think the Steelers plan to do in this draft and how they normally operate. For one, the first rule was you had to draft a center in the first 2 rounds. That was because of the Mason Cole cutting. So that forced you to either take basically Jackson Powers-Johnson, Zach Frazier, or maybe a Cedric Van Pran in the second round if you were really feeling up for it. And your second rule was you also had to draft a defensive tackle somewhere. That could even be in the 7th round. Some of y'all did that, and I saw y'all was being slick, but I said anywhere, so it could be anywhere. And the third rule was no trades, because I want people to understand, I want people in this exercise to kind of get a sense of where people are going, what kind of players are going to fall to different rounds. So without further ado, our winner this week was Paige Barger, who submitted their picks. And I thought this was a very realistic feel to how I could see the draft play out, addressing certain needs with players that I think could meet a lot of the Steelers standards. Now, we've talked all about Jackson Powers-Johnson. Paige went right away off the board, got Jackson Powers-Johnson at 20, fits exactly for what we're talking about. Longtime center, leader, guy that can be paired with Broderick Jones for the future, another pillar player for the offensive line. Bang, off the board. Mason Cole's replaced. No more questions. So that one's easy. We've talked about Jackson Powers-Johnson a lot. But I really like what Paige did, also getting T'Vondre Sweat, the big defensive tackle out of Texas. T'Vondre Sweat can be really physical, really aggressive. I like the idea of a T'Vondre Sweat. Excuse me, but Sweat's going to be a person that if you can get a guy like that addressed in the second round, and that guy works out, that's your interior defensive line partner with Keanu Benton for years to come. Like if that guy works out the way he looks like he could, and he continues to improve, the run game up the middle is going to be solid. Those guys can develop as pass rushers. You're going to have a strong middle of the front, and you basically have your succession plan in place for whatever happens whenever Cam Hayward does choose to retire. And I think that could be a strong way to solidify that. And it's a serious need right now. The Steelers need to get better on the defensive front. I think Keanu Benton was a good first step in that. And I think Leal could still be a step somewhere, but Leal's still a tweener. He's not a bruiser, beat him up, put him in the middle of the line, and he's going to eat up 2 blockers or, just destroy everything, get in the backfield every play. He's more of a guy that's going to be using his athleticism in different ways. I think T'Vondre Sweat, he's the complete opposite. He's but he's going to be a big bruiser, physical. I'm going to eat up the gap space in the middle of your offensive line. I'm going to be really annoying to try to block out of the hole and create space for your running back. So T'Vondre Sweat, good pick there, Paige. Now, moving on here, Kieran Amagidije, I definitely butchered that person's name, but the offensive tackle out of Yale. What's good about this player? Very high upside, extremely athletic, really good, a lot of good intangibles that are not intangibles, excuse me, a lot of good just raw stats as far as how they're built, how they're athletic. They should test well at the combine. A lot of really good things there. Thing is, though, very raw. You're going to have to learn a lot, but third round, a person who is graded to be a very good run blocker and just needs to get better in pass protection. Hello, that screams right tackle. Move Broderick Jones over to left tackle. Put Amagidije, or I'm going to just say Kieran, the guy from Yale, from now on, so I stopped butchering that person's name. But Kieran, move that guy to right tackle. Make Dan Moore fight it out for right tackle. If Dan Moore can't figure it out, you got a rookie starting over there, and you're learning. And again, you got anchors in Jackson Powers-Johnson, Broderick Jones, Isaac Seumalo, James Daniels to hold it down so that rookie doesn't hurt you as much. Then this is where it also got interesting for Paige's picks here. Was in the 4th round. The Steelers right now, if they don't trade, they have back-to-back picks in the 4th round, 120 and 121. First, going with Brendan Rice out of USC, the wide receiver, at 120, a 6'3" wide receiver, really good hands, really good ball skills, goes up and gets the ball, and has really good instincts as far as how to attack the ball. I like this pick in the 4th round because it's not too high of a thing. I think there's some things that Brendan Rice has to smooth out. I'm not a big fan of his route running compared to some of the other guys that they could get. I really like Malachi Corley for that, from Western Kentucky. But Brendan Rice could be another go up and get the ball type of guy. And those type of guys can be really big, winning combat catches, making big plays, and a good person to pair with George Pickens for the future. Because again, finding a wide receiver in this draft can be very important to finding the option to pair with George Pickens for the future. Because Deontay Johnson's on the last year of his deal, like we said on the Friday episode when we said he's probably the most likely player to get traded. Not saying that he's likely to be traded, but he is. If there is one player and you had to make me pick one player that would be traded this year, Deontay Johnson makes the most sense because the Steelers aren't going to pay him a big contract after this year, and that means he'll definitely be a free agent. So why not get some free agent value for him in this situation? And I was on WGR radio in Buffalo Friday morning, being asked would the Steelers trade Deontay Johnson, because there's buzz around the league for teams that have really good quarterbacks. They want Deontay Johnson. If you can get a second or third round pick for that guy, I think it'd be worth the shot there. So a Brendan Rice type of receiver in the middle rounds makes a lot of sense. Other picks here by Page was Keaton Oladapo, a big safety out of Oregon State, physical, can line up in different spots, help covering receivers out of the slot, help covering tight ends, 6'2", really good size. Needs to get better at tackling, but a decent pick there. And then other picks here, Tommy Eichenberg, a linebacker to Ohio State, and then 7th round, Brevin Spann, a tight end out of Minnesota. Those are just, hoping those work out for depth if you're the Steelers. But overall, this hit on a lot of points, and it got down to the point that we were talking about here on the show today. You got a center to replace Mason Cole and to be your center for the future. I wanted to get a defensive tackle somewhere for the Steelers in this situation, because I do think that they need to buttress their defensive line and find their Keanu Benton's partner for the future there. They also need to find Joey Porter Jr.'s partner for the future. But as I said, if that's the position they get right in free agency, I think it sets them up really well so they can address a lot of other positions of need. And again, you get a tackle and a wide receiver in this draft class. You hit on those picks. If this draft class hits the way that the last draft class hit, with 3 bona fide starters and 2 really good role players who were figuring things out, in like Darnell Washington and Nick Herbig were this past year, I think that puts the Steelers in a really good spot to build the new core along with the current core of guys that are sticking around, like TJ Watt, Minkah Fitzpatrick, Najee Harris, George Pickens, Pat Freiermuth, those type of guys, Broderick Jones. This has the chance to really build something here if they do it right. It's also why I think they should be adding to their draft picks and keeping their draft picks rather than trading them away to try to get a quarterback splash at a player that's either over the hill or is a retread from somewhere else that didn't work out, and you're taking a big gamble on right now, where instead you can get a rookie that you can develop for the next 4 or 5 years and keep building the roster in the way that you want to be the most successful. Again, thanks for tuning into the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter. Follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Carter Critiques. Read my work at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, post-gazette.com. Find me here in the Locked On Steelers podcast every Monday through Friday on your favorite podcasting apps and on YouTube. Again, we apologize to those who didn't get to listen to this on their morning commute on their favorite podcasting apps. It was due to some technical difficulties and just some complications with the network. That will not happen moving forward. We will have those episodes up early in the morning, but we thank those who did listen to it and did watch it on YouTube. I'm back tomorrow talking about what Omar Khan said on Monday here on the Locked On Steelers podcast and getting you ready for Combine Week in Indianapolis.